भज रामं भज रामं भज रामं भज रामं भज रे मानस भज रामं भज रे मानस भज रामं भज रामं भज रामं भज रामं भज रामं भज रे मानस भज रामं भज रे मानस भज रामं कल्याण रामं भज रामं कल्याण रामं भज रामं कोदंड रामं भज रामं कोदंड रामं भज रामं पट्टाभिरामं भज रामं पावन रामं भज रामं पट्टाभिरामं भज रामं पावन रामं भज रामं भज रामं भज रामं भज रे मानस भज रामं भज रामं भज रामं भज रे मानस भज रामं कल्याण रामं भज रामं कल्याण रामं भज रामं कोदंड रामं भज रामं कोदंड रामं भज रामं पट्टाभिरामं भज रामं पावन रामं भज रामं पट्टाभिरामं भज रामं पावन रामं भज रामं भज रामं भज रामं भज रामं भज रामं भज रे मानस भज रामं भज रे मानस भज रामं भज रामं भज रामं भज रामं भज रामं भज रे मानस भज रामं भज रे मानस भज रामं 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 कृपालु भज मन हरण भव भयदारुण श्री रामचंद्र कृपालु भज मन हरण भव भयदारुण नवकंज लोचन कंज मुखकर कंज पद कंजारुण नवकंज लोचन कंज मुखकर कंज पद कंजारुण श्री रामचंद्र कृपालु भज मन हरण भव भयदारुण श्री रामचंद्र कृपालु भज मन हरण भव भयदारुण कंदर्प अगणित अमित छवि नवनील नील सुन्दरं कन्दर्प गणित नवनीर सुन्दरं पटपीतमानव हरित रुचि शुचि नौमि जनक सुतावर पटपीतमानव हरित रुचि शुचि नौमि जनक सुतावर श्री रामचंद्र कृपालु ब्रजमन हरण भव भयदारु श्री रामचंद्र कृपालु ब्रजमन हरण भव भयदारु वजुदीन बंधु दिनेश दानव दैत्य वंश निकंदनम वजुदीन बंधु दिनेश दानव दैत्य वंश निकंदनम रघुनंद आनंद कंद कौशल चंद दशरथ नंदनम रघुनंद आनंद कंद कौशल चंद दशरथ नंदनम श्री रामचंद्र कृपालु ब्रजमन हरण भव भयदारुण श्री रामचंद्र कृपालु ब्रजमन हरण भव भयदारुण शिरमुकुट कुंडल तिलक चारुदार अंग विभूषणं शिरमुकुट कुंडल तिलक चारुदार अंग विभूषणं आजानुभुज शरपधर संग्राम जित कर भूषणम् आजानुभुज शरचापधर संग्राम जित कर भूषणम् श्री रामचंद्र कृपालु ब्रजमन हरण भव भयदारुण श्री रामचंद्र कृपालु ब्रजमन हरण भव भयदारुण इति वदत तुलसीदास शंकर शेष मुनि मनरंजनम् इति वदत तुलसीदास शंकर शेष मुनि मनरंजनम् मम हृदय कंज निवास कुरु कामादि खलदल गंज मम हृदय कंज निवास कुरु कामादि खलदल गंज श्री रामचंद्र कृपालु ब्रजमन हरण भव भयदारुण श्री रामचंद्र कृपालु ब्रजमन हरण भव भयदारुण नवकंज लोचन कंज मुख कर कंज पद कंजारुण नवकंज लोचन कंज मुख कर कंज पद कंजारुण श्री रामचंद्र कृपालु ब्रजमन हरण भव भयदारुण श्री रामचंद्र कृपालु ब्रजमन हरण भव भयदारुण श्री रामचंद्र कृपालु ब्रजमन हरण भव भयदारुण श्री राम श्री राम भज रामं भज रामं भज रामं भज रामं भज रे मानस भज रामं भज रे मानस भज रामं भज रामं भज रामं भज रामं भज रामं भज रे मानस भज रामं भज रे मानस भज रामं कल्याण रामं भज रामं कल्याण रामं भज रामं कोदण्ड रामं भज रामं कोदण्ड रामं भज रामं पट्टाभिरामं भज रामं पावन रामं भज रामं पट्टाभिरामं भज रामं पावन रामं भज रामं भज रामं भज रामं भज रे मानस भज रामं भज रामं भज रामं भज रे मानस भज रामं कल्याण रामं भज रामं कल्याण रामं भज रामं कोदण्ड रामं भज रामं कोदण्ड रामं भज रामं पट्टाभिरामं भज रामं पावन रामं भज रामं पट्टाभिरामं भज रामं पावन रामं भज रामं भज रामं भज रामं भज रामं भज रामं भज रे मानस भज रामं भज रे मानस भज रामं भज रामं भज रामं भज रामं भज रामं भज रे मानस भज रामं भज रे मानस भज रामं भज रामं भज रामं भज रामं भज रामं भज रामं भज
हरि ओम।
हरि ओम।
हरि ओम।
हरि ओम।
हरि ओम सर।
हरि ओम।
हरि ओम।
हरि ओम। हरि ओम सर।
प्रातः स्मरामि हृदि तं स्फुरदात्मतत्त्वं सच्चित्सुखं परमहं सगतिं तुरीयम् यत्स्वप्नजागरसुषुप्तमवेति नित्यं तद्ब्रह्म निष्कलमहं भूतसंक्षीणपानां शान्तानां वीतरागिणाम् मुमुक्षूणामपेक्षोऽयम् आत्मबोधो विधीयते बोधोऽन्यसाधनेभ्यो हि साक्षान्मोक्षैकसाधनम् पाकस्य वह्निवज्ञानं विना मोक्षो न सिद्ध्यति। Okay, chapter 13 of the Bhagavad Gita. We'll chant verses 1 to 5. Chapter 13, verses 1 to 5. अर्जुन उवाच प्रकृतिं पुरुषं चैव क्षेत्रं क्षेत्रज्ञमेव च एतद्वेदितुमिच्छामि ज्ञानं ज्ञेयं च केशव। अर्जुन उवाच प्रकृतिं पुरुषं चैव क्षेत्रं क्षेत्रज्ञमेव च एतद्वेदितुमिच्छामि ज्ञानं ज्ञेयं च केशव। श्रीभगवानुवाच इदं शरीरं कौन्तेय क्षेत्रमित्यभिधीयते एतद्यो वेत्ति तं प्राहुः क्षेत्रज्ञ इति तद्विदिः। श्रीभगवानुवाच इदं शरीरं कौन्तेय क्षेत्रमित्यभिधीयते एतद्यो वेत्ति तं प्राहुः क्षेत्रज्ञ इति तद्विदः। क्षेत्रज्ञं चापि मां विद्धि सर्वक्षेत्रेषु भारत क्षेत्रक्षेत्रज्ञयो ज्ञानं यत्तज्ज्ञानं मतं मम। क्षेत्रज्ञं चापि मां विद्धि सर्वक्षेत्रेषु भारत क्षेत्रक्षेत्रज्ञयो ज्ञानं यत्तज्ज्ञानं मतं मम। तत्क्षेत्रं यच्च यादृक् च यद्विकारि यतश्च स च यो यत्प्रभावश्च तत्समासेन मे शृणु। तत्क्षेत्रं यच्च यादृक् च याद्विकारः यद्विकारयतश्च स च यो यत्प्रभावश्च तत्समासेन मे शृणु। ऋषिभिर्बहुधा गीतं छन्दोभिर्विविधैः पृथक् ब्रह्मसूत्रपदश्चैव हेतुमद्भिर्विनिश्चितैः। ऋषिभिर्बहुधा गीतं छन्दोभिर्विविधैः पृथक् ब्रह्मसूत्रपदश्चैव हेतुमद्भिर्विनिश्चितैः. Okay, chapter 13 of the Bhagavad Gita. Last class we completed chapter 12, and with chapter 12 we completed the second section, the second portion of the Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita has 18 chapters. Broadly, chapter 1 to 6, it's not officially in the text, there's no such division, but upon study and analysis of the Bhagavad Gita, many scholars, many sages have broadly divided it into 3 sections. The first section is chapter 1 to 6. And if you follow the sequence of the chapters, it follows an individual's journey, path of karma, the individual's passage of growth from an extrovert to an introvert, from one with many desires to one with the single desire for meditation and self-realization alone. And that section concludes with Dhyana Yoga, chapter 6, where he elaborates on meditation and the eventual goal of meditation. Chapter 7 to 12 then highlights the theme of bhakti, the language, the shift in language in chapters 7 to 12, the nature of the discussion in chapter 7 to 12, reaching its zenith in the Vishwarupa Darshan, and concluding with, quite appropriately, the 35 qualities of a devotee. These 6 chapters, 7 to 12, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, are broadly considered to highlight the course of bhakti. So chapter 1 to 6 highlights the course of karma, chapter 7 to 12 highlights bhakti. And chapter 13 to 18, once again, reaching its zenith perhaps in chapter 15. But all the way starting immediately in chapter 13 itself, you'll see the shift in language. The highlight is going to be knowledge, it's going to be jnanam. And some of the most subtle concepts, even in fact in this chapter, kshetra, kshetragnya, the words themselves are difficult to pronounce. Kshetra, kshetragnya. What is he talking about? Almost immediately, there's a shift in the theme. So 13 to 18 covers jnanam, 1 to 6 karma, 7 to 12 bhakti, 13 to 18 jnana. There's no such official demarcation in the Bhagavad Gita. This is just a high level analysis of the theme, various themes in the text. So 13th chapter is called Kshetragnya Vibhaga Yoga. Vibhaga, the distinction, the yoga of the distinction between Kshetra, field, and Kshetragnya, one who has knowledge, the knower of the field. One who has knowledge of the field. The distinction between field and knower of field. What is field? What is knower? What is he talking about? We'll find out shortly. Chapter begins with Arjuna's question. Please, Lord, clarify for me some terms. And the rest of the chapter is the Lord's answers to those questions. So the first verse itself presents the question, and the rest of the chapter, pretty much the rest of the chapter, is spent in elaborating on the answers to Arjuna's question in the first verse. Incidentally, the first verse is not present in, this is just trivia, this is not any philosophy. The first verse is not present in many versions. See, one of the things that is unique about these scriptures is that they are present in their original form. However, there is one such deviation. See, if you read any other scripture, there are many, many versions of it, particularly in certain other religions. Something that is monumental almost in the Hindu tradition is that the scriptures have retained their original form. But here you have a slight, uh, I won't really call it a controversy, but a slight departure from that. Many versions omit the first verse of this chapter. So if you ask anyone how many verses in the Bhagavad Gita, depending on their background, depending on their, which school of thought essentially they come from. Some will say 700 verses, some will say 701 verses. Depending on where they come from, some people will say 700 verses, some people will say 701 verses. That one verse is chapter 13, verse number 1. So in many versions, it's omitted. In this particular version which we are studying, we are going to study it. It's simply the questions. In the larger scheme of things, it doesn't really change anything. It adds context to this chapter. That's about it. Because suddenly from Bhakti Yoga, you're shifting to this discussion about these philosophical terms. So this first verse gives context to the chapter. Okay, so this chapter, broadly speaking, is divided into 6 parts. The first is, it begins with the question of Arjuna. He asks questions about 3 sets of terms: Kshetra and Kshetrajna, Prakriti and Purusha, Jnanam and Nyayam. I'm going to discuss this shortly. But 3 sets of questions: Prakriti and Purusha, Kshetra, Kshetrajna, Jnanam and Nyayam. So the first section talks about Kshetra and Kshetrajna. The second section talks about a Jnani. The third section talks about Nyayam. The fourth section talks about Prakriti and Purusha. All together answering collectively Arjuna's question in verse number 1. All together answering Arjuna's question in verse number 1. Thereafter, he gives an elaboration on the path of spiritual evolution, the way to realize the Purusha, the way to realize the self. And then urges Arjuna in the concluding verses to liberate himself, to reveal the eye of wisdom, to work towards opening the Jnana Chakshu, the eye of wisdom, to lead to the ultimate goal of life, which is liberation. So you can already see the focus in this chapter immediately is on knowledge in certain concepts, certain terms. Without further ado, we begin with verse number 1. Arjuna Uvacha Prakritim Purusham Chaiva Kshetram Kshetrajnyamev cha Etad viditumichhami Jnanam Nyayam cha Keshava. Arjuna Uvacha Prakritim Purusham Chaiva Kshetram Kshetrajnyamev cha Etad viditumichhami Jnanam Nyayam cha Keshava. Etad veditumichhami Jnanam Nyayam cha Keshava. Arjuna Uvacha, Arjuna said, Prakriti and Purusha, also Kshetra and Kshetrajna, also Jnanam and Nyayam, knowledge and that which ought to be known. These I wish to learn, O Keshava. See, many times when I open up for questions, Suddenly there's a silence because some people ask questions and then suddenly there's a silence. And then someone will ask a question. It's not related to exactly what we've discussed in this class, but I have some. So I said, okay, please ask. That's exactly what's happening. Uh, Not exactly related to what you just said, Lord Krishna, but I have some questions about some of these terms. Can you answer them for me? Suppose we've been talking about, I don't know, some concept. Suppose we've been talking about titiksha, and some people have questions about titiksha. Somebody raises their hand. Not exactly what we've been talking about. I want to know about mumukshatu. It's not what we've been talking about immediately, but okay, it's relevant. So we'll answer that question. So think of it as that kind of a shift. We've been talking about bhakti, and suddenly Arjuna says, okay, I have a different question. I want to know about a couple of other terms. And these were terms perhaps well known in his time, and he's seeking some clarification about them. Whenever a verse like this comes, I remember Partho Vatsa Sudhi Bhokta. Arjuna is just the calf. He's just the calf that gets little bit of the milk. The true beneficiaries are you and me. We get time to learn about these new things and spend time to actually contemplate about them. Very, very philosophical chapter. And thank you to Arjuna for asking this question, because in answering this question, the Lord gives us incredible knowledge. So, Arjuna asks for a clarification on three sets of terms. First set is Prakriti and Purusha, the couplets. Prakriti and Purusha. Second set is Kshetra and Kshetrajna. And the third set is Jnanam and Jnayam. Knowledge, Jnanam and Jnayam, that which ought to be known, the objective of knowledge. The objective of knowledge, that which you are trying to know through knowledge. Jnayam is the goal, knowledge is the means. Very interesting. It's worth thinking about. Knowledge is the means through which you reach Jnayam. Knowledge is the means. Knowledge itself is not the goal. Knowledge is the means through which knowledge gives you the direction. Knowledge helps you reach Jnayam. That which ought to be known. So there's a distinction. There's a distinction between knowledge and the destination of knowledge, which is Jnayam, that which ought to be known. So please clarify these terms to me. These I wish to learn. Ichhami. These I wish to learn. Veditum ichhami. O Keshava. Prakriti is matter, Purusha is spirit. Every individual is a combination of Prakriti and Purusha, spirit and matter. Prakriti and Purusha coming together create an individual, just as electricity and an appliance come together to create an expression. Electricity and a bulb come together to create an expression of light. Similarly, Prakriti and Purusha come together to create an expression of life of an individual. Kshetra, field, and Kshetrajna, the knower of that field, the knower of that Kshetra. What are these things? I want to know. I wish to understand. And the Lord answers immediately on Kshetra and Kshetrajna. Verse number 2. Shri Bhagavanuvacha Edam Shariram Kaunteya Kshetramityabhidhiyate एतद्यो वेत्ति तं प्राहुः क्षेत्रज्ञ इति तद्विदः। श्रीभगवानुवाच इदं शरीरं कौन्तेय क्षेत्रमित्यभिधीयते एतद्यो वेत्ति तं प्राहुः क्षेत्रज्ञ इति तद्विदः। Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, Blessed Lord said, Idam Shariram, O Kaunteya, Idam Shariram, this body, O Kaunteya, Kshetra Mitya Bhidhiyate, is called Kshetra. This body is called Kshetra. He who knows this, Etat, Etad Yah Vetti, that person, whoever, he who knows this is called Kshetrajna. By those who know of that. Tadvidaha, knowers of that. Tat vidaha, knows of that. So the knows of that define Kshetra and Kshetrajna. I'm going to break up this verse because immediately, I don't know about you, but when I first read this verse, I was like, where have we landed suddenly? Almost seems like a crash landing. Huh? Crash landing. Takes you a couple of times, you have to read this verse to understand what is he saying. So the knowers of that, Tadvidaha, define Kshetra to be this body and Kshetrajna to be he who knows this, the Kshetra. First time you read this, you'll see, even I could have said that. Kshetra is one who knows, Kshetrajna is one who knows the Kshetra. What is he saying? This body, Idam Shariram, composed of not just the gross body. This body comprised of all our bodies, of the physical body, the subtle body, the causal body. The Sthula Sharira extends not just to your physical body, but your perceivable world around you, sense objects around you. He's going to elaborate in verse number 6, he's going to elaborate on this and give you an understanding beforehand. This body, which means your physical body and the world around you, perceivable world around you, the sense objects around you, your subtle body, the mind and the intellect, the ego, the causal body, your vasanas, all these collectively is called Kshetra. And there is within you something that is distinct, something that is different, something that is experiencing this Kshetra. There is within you something that is distinct, different, something that is experiencing this Kshetra. That is called Kshetrajna. I repeat, this body comprising of the physical body and the sense objects around you, comprising of the subtle body, the mind and the intellect, comprising of the vasanas, the causal body, this collectively is called Kshetra. And there is distinct and different from the Kshetra. One who knows the Kshetra, one who experiences the Kshetra. That is called Kshetrajna. The common person doesn't make this distinction. A person of ignorance doesn't make this distinction. A person of ignorance merges these two. A person of ignorance is lost. The meaning of ignorance is one who doesn't know the distinction between the kshetra. Who is what is ignorance? Ignorance is the loss of identification of the self, of the kshetrajna, as it were. One who misunderstands oneself to be this body, to be this kshetra, to be this ego. So the loss of the distinction between kshetra and kshetrajna is ignorance. The knowers of that, tat vidaha, in the scriptures, tat, just like the Mahavakya, tat tvamasi, that thou art. Tat refers to the self. Tat refers to Brahman. Tat refers to the highest knowledge. So those who know of that, tat vidaha means those who have the highest knowledge, those who have the ultimate realization. They are able to clearly make the distinction between kshetra and kshetrajna. They are teaching us about the distinction between kshetra and kshetrajna. They are trying to pull us out of our ignorance and learn the difference.
Broken sleep. Oh, I'm so sorry.
He's using
You
different
should just
terms.
wear earplugs at night.
Hmm?
So
मैं तो
otherwise,
भागती है वो
Is there a question?
he's using terms. Kshetrajna is self, and Kshetra is like we have been talking below that we are not this body, we are just not this mind, we are not this intellect, we are that Atman. So Kshetrajna is that Atman, that self.
Correct. Absolutely. It's
So why this new?
you are saying it after getting the explanation. Huh? You are saying it because you and I have had the privilege of studying this time and over again, hundreds of times. But if you think of it anatomically, it's a very useful way. It's like a metaphor. This body is a field, and your real self is a, is participating in that field, is playing in the field. So it's a nice metaphor. That's about it. It gives you a different way to think about spirit and matter, prakriti and purusha, because the field is what you are experiencing. Hmm? See, you're not experiencing the entire world. You're experiencing the world through your body, isn't it? What you experience is actually your mind. If your mind doesn't have a certain perception, a certain sense, you won't experience it. It may be there, you won't experience it. So this so-called experience is an experience actually of this body collectively. Your senses, your mind, your intellect. It's a collective experience. So beautifully he calls this thing the kshetra, the field, the arena of your experience. But distinct from this arena is the experiencer. Distinct from this field, separate from this field, is the knower of this field, the experiencer of this field. He's simply asking you, inviting you to make that distinction. We don't make the distinction. We assume we are this kshetra. We are lost in the assumption. The whole meaning of ignorance is I am the body, I am this body. No, this body is a kshetra. You are simply an experiencer of the body. This mind and its emotions is the kshetra. You are an experiencer of the kshetra. You are the kshetrajna. The whole collective knowledge of Vedanta given out by knowers of that, Tadvidaha, is simply saying this. Learn to make the distinction between Kshetra and Kshetranya. I'm speaking ahead of myself because I'm actually discussing verse number 3. I'm actually discussing verse number 3. This verse simply is saying Kshetra and Kshetrajna. The knowers of that, the enlightened people, make this distinction. This body, and he's saying, what is Kshetra? This body. Not just the world. The first thing would be to think, oh, the world is a Kshetra. No, this body is a Kshetra. The world you experience is actually through the body. There is no world beyond the perception of your body. The world you experience is through the perception of your body. When I say body, I mean collectively body, mind, intellect. The senses, the mind, the intellect. So this body is the entire realm of experience. Distinct and different from this realm is the experiencer, the Kshetrajna. The wise make this distinction. The knowers of that, Tadvidaha, make this distinction, said the Blessed Lord. And he continues in verse number 3. Kshetrajnam chapi mam vidhi sarvakshetreshu bharata kshetrajnayo jnanam yattajnanam matam mama kshetrajnam chapi mam vidhi sarvakshetreshu bharata kshetrajnayo jnanam yattajnanam matam mama. And, O Bharata, also know me as a Kshetrajna, knower in all Kshetras, fields. The knowledge of Kshetra and Kshetrajna, that is considered by me to be knowledge. Also, O Bharata, O best among people of Bharat, O representative of Bharata. Who is a Bharata? Bharata is one who has this deepest knowledge of life. Bharata is one who makes this inner journey the highlight of their life, the purpose of their life. O Bharata, know me as the Kshetrajna, the knower in all fields, in all Kshetras. Stay with me. Kshetra means body. This body is Kshetra. So all individual bodies of people, different individuals, are different Kshetras. Your body and the world it projects and the world it experiences is a different Kshetra. My body and the world my body projects is a different Kshetra, different from a third person. Experiencing all bodies, all Kshetras is the Kshetrajna. That's what we studied in verse number 2, right? Verse number 2 means is saying there is a Kshetra and a Kshetrajna experiencing that Kshetra. Now he says, I am, know me, Krishna, Brahman, know me as the knower in all Kshetras. I am the Kshetrajna in all Kshetras. I am the Kshetrajna. The Kshetrajna is one in all fields. I am that pure consciousness enlivening, enabling, and experiencing all Kshetras. Right now, you have got this knowledge of Kshetra and Kshetrajna. You have begun to acknowledge this knowledge that there is a Kshetra and there is a Kshetrajna. But still, the Kshetrajna appears to be inseparable from the Kshetra, isn't it? Yes, very good. I have heard, I have understood this concept. Kshetrajna is different from Kshetra. And yet, the Kshetrajna seems completely enmeshed in the Kshetra. There's no way to pull it out. There's no way to separate it. Your Kshetrajna, the Kshetrajna that you are, is called what is called conditioned consciousness. Your Kshetrajna is conditioned consciousness. The path of spiritual evolution is realizing that the Kshetrajna is independent of the Kshetra, has nothing to do with the Kshetra. The path of spiritual evolution is actually unconditioning yourself, unconditioning the Kshetrajna, as it were. Till you reach a point of unconditioned, pure consciousness. That, he says, am I. That is Krishna. I am that Kshetrajna, that unconditioned consciousness in all Kshetras. Pure consciousness, when it meets a Kshetra, it becomes conditioned consciousness. When pure consciousness meets Kshetra, it becomes conditioned consciousness. That's what you are, that's what I am. And the path of spiritual evolution is actually unconditioning, is actually rising above, growing, transcending the Kshetra. So he says, O Bharata, know me as that Kshetra in all, that Kshetrajna in all Kshetras. I am that one Kshetrajna. The pure consciousness is one. The self is one. The Atman is one. Having identified with the Kshetra, with the body, it becomes a conditioned consciousness. That's about it. But in truth, and when you grow, you will understand, you will realize the self in you is the same as the self in me, is the same as the self in a third person. The self is one and the same. That self is God. That Godhead lies within you. That Godhead is your Kshetrajna, Tattvamasi, that thou art. Tattvamasi. So this first line of this verse is an indication to that Mahavakya. I am Atma Brahma. This Atman is Brahman. This Kshetrajna is in fact the Lord itself. He says, know me as the Kshetrajna in all Kshetras. In each and every Kshetra. The knowledge of Kshetra and Kshetrajna is considered by me to be knowledge. This, what we have discussed very briefly in the last 30 minutes, is considered by Lord Krishna to be knowledge. Nothing else. What is knowledge? Bhagavad Gita, Ashtavakra Gita, Atma Bodha, Tattva Bodha. What is knowledge? Knowledge of Kshetra and Kshetrajna, the distinction is knowledge. That's it. Wherever you get it from. Wherever you get it from. The purpose of scriptural study is to bring to your awareness this distinction of Kshetra and Kshetrajna. The purpose of spiritual study is to push you into this journey of uncovering the Kshetrajna. That's about it. What a beautiful definition of knowledge. The ultimate definition of knowledge. Knowledge of Kshetra and Kshetrajna. What we have discussed in the last 30 minutes is a lifetime of unfoldment. This is perhaps the first introduction to this concept. It will take us perhaps a lifetime to uncover, to unfold. And that's the journey. That's the journey of knowledge. That's the journey of Jnanam. Nitya Anitya Viveka Vichara, says Adi Shankaracharya. What is knowledge? Nitya Anitya Viveka Vichara. The discrimination between what is Nitya and Anitya. Kshetra is Anitya. Kshetra is perishable. Kshetra has a beginning and an end. Kshetra will have a birth, a growth, a zenith, and a fall. A kshetra will go from manifest to unmanifest. So a kshetra is anitya. It's impermanent. The kshetrajna is nitya, permanent. So this is what Adi Shankaracharya was referring to when he says nitya anitya viveka vichara. Knowledge is the distinction, study of the distinction between kshetra and kshetrajna. O Bharata, step into this journey. O Bharata, you are one who is capable of this journey. This journey is your purpose, is your ultimate goal. Get on to it. This is what it means to be a Bharata. To rise above all mundane pursuits and strive to realize Kshetrajna. And you can please, verse number 4. Tatshetram yaccha yadrikcha yadvikari yat sachayo yat prabhavascha tat samasena me shrinu. Tatshetram yaccha yadrikcha yadvikari yataschaya sachayo yat prabhavascha tat samasena me shrinu. What is kshetra? What that kshetra is, what that field is, and what is it like? What are its modification, and whence it is, where it is. Also, what he is and what his power is. Tat, he. That hear from me in brief. Saha. Saha is the word used, he, indicating Brahman. So, what is this kshetra? What I have just described briefly in verse number 2. This body is kshetra. What actually constitutes this kshetra? What is it like? What is its various modifications? I'm going to tell you very briefly. So, hear from me. The reason he says briefly is because there's no end. Huh? If we start describing this, we can go on and on and on and on and on. But let me tell you in a gist what it is. Let me tell you very briefly what is this kshetra and what are its various modifications. So he goes on to give the bifurcation of the kshetra in verses 5 and 6. ऋषिभिर्बहुधा गीतं छन्दोभिर्विविधैः पृथक् ब्रह्मसूत्रप्रदश्चैव हेतुमद्भिर्विनिश्चितैः ऋषिभिर्बहुधा गीतं छन्दोभिर्विविधैः पृथक् ब्रह्मसूत्रप्रदश्चैव हेतु हेतुमद्भिर्विनिश्चितैः. He says, sung by sages in many ways, in various hymns, and also in distinctive precepts, indicating Brahman, full of reason and certainty. So 5, 6, and 7, he describes Kshetra and Kshetragni. So here he is describing Saha, he, sung by many sages in various ways, in various hymns, and also in distinctive precepts, indicating Brahman, full of reason and certainty. So Saha, that Kshetragnya, that the supreme reality, it has been tried to convey to humanity in various ways. The whole purpose of scriptural knowledge is to unfold the knowledge of that, of Brahman, to help you in your realization. However, you cannot perceive God, you cannot feel God, you cannot think of God. Well, you can think of God, but you cannot think God. You cannot reach God by thought. You cannot perceive God, you cannot feel God, and you cannot think God. God is not an object of perception, not an object of feeling, not an object of thought. God is the subject. You can only realize God, you can only become God, you can only merge with God. So, no amount of scriptural knowledge or no amount of bhajans will make you directly experience that. Yet, all knowledge, all scriptures, all bhajans and kirtans, all chants, all of these are an incredible support on your journey. So he says, sung by sages in many ways. The sages have tried each and every way. They've left no stone unturned. Whether it's through the Jnana Marga or the Bhakti Marga or the Karma Marga, they've sung the glories of the Lord in many ways, in various hymns and in precepts, in the most incredible chants and the most incredible mantras, and also in the most subtlest of knowledge in the scriptures, the most distinctive precepts, in various hymns that reach out to your emotion, that try to invoke that feeling in you, and in also distinctive precepts full of reason and certainty that try to appeal to your understanding, that try to appeal to your sense of reason, to your intellect. So, all forms of knowledge, both articulate and inarticulate, both intellectual and emotional, all means of approaching the Lord have been provided by the sages. All of this to help you in your experience of the transcendental. All of this to support you in your journey within. I think I've mentioned this in the class before. First class when I entered the Vedanta Academy. Swamiji was taking the Mundaka Upanishad, and his first lines were, all knowledge exists to pacify the mind. All knowledge exists to pacify the mind. Similarly, all bhajans exist to pacify the mind. All kirtans exist to pacify the mind. All chants exist to pacify the mind. All scriptures exist to pacify the mind. The purpose of all this knowledge is just to make you shut up. That's it. Bhakti is the purpose of bhakti is to make you shut up. The purpose of knowledge is to make you shut up. Is to make you realize what? I don't know. That's the purpose. So that when you've quietened down, you can delve into dhanam with complete surrender, with that feeling, I don't know. I know nothing. I know nothing. Remember, when does surrender arise? Surrender arises when the intellect fails to understand, fails to comprehend. That's the ultimate purpose of knowledge. It's a paradox. The purpose of jnanam is not to make you know, is to make you realize you don't know. The purpose of knowledge is not to make you know. The purpose of knowledge is to make you realize you don't know. You might be thinking, why am I speaking in such riddles? This is how the Upanishads speak. At least now some of you will realize, I don't want to study the Upanishads. This is how the Upanishads speak. Yadi manyase suvedeti no na vedeti vedacha. Yadi manyase suvedeti no na vedeti vedacha. If you think you know, if you think you have understood, you've not understood. So these various ways, within knowledge, the various approaches to knowledge, the themes of paradox, the themes of contradiction, the themes of metaphors, the themes of similes, that all sorts of approaches have been applied just to invoke in you that inspiration to go with it. But it's endless. It's endless. So, what is this Kshetra? Verses 6 and 7. Verses 6 and 7. Actually, it's already time almost. Verses 6 and 7 will describe the Kshetra. And thereafter, he'll go on to knowledge and Jnanam and Neyam. So, Kshetra and Kshetrajna. An elaboration of what comprises the Kshetra is coming up in verses 6 and 7. But the knowledge of Kshetra and Kshetrajna, the distinction between Kshetra and Kshetrajna, that is the hallmark of knowledge. That is the hallmark of your spiritual evolution. That's the purpose of knowledge. To invoke in you that inquiry, to bring to you that awareness. You are not this body. You are not this mind, you are not this intellect. This body, this mind, this intellect is the Kshetra. It's simply the field of experience. You are that Kshetrajna, that Tvamasi. Realizing that is knowledge. And when you realize that, you will roar like a lion. You will say, Aham Brahmasmi. But that's not just intellectually understanding it. That's a visceral realization of that. The sage who understands Tattvamasi will roar, Aham Brahmasmi. That I am. I am that Brahman. With that thought, we'll conclude today. As you'll appreciate, it's been a sudden shift in gear. So I hope it didn't cause too much of a jerk. But chapter 12 to 13 is a distinct shift. So do take the time to read through these verses again, read through the introduction to the chapter, and we will see you again on Thursday to continue our discussion. So with that thought, we'll conclude today's class, and I'm happy to take up any questions.
So you said that intellectually, so probably we've been reading this, and we are not the body, not the mind, not the intellect. Uh, what uh, what what should change in ourselves for us to understand that we have been able to make this distinction?
What should change in us for us to understand? For us to
Like
for us
this,
to know that we're making this
I've,
distinction.
I've
Sorry, I was just clarifying your question.
sorry.
I was just clarifying your question.
So, we have been reading this that we are not this body, not this mind, not this intellect. But हमारे अंदर ऐसा क्या चेंज आना चाहिए जिससे besides and beyond intellectually हम एक्चुअल में इसको समझ पा रहे हैं?
Detachment. You know that
I thought this is the answer.
you'll realize that this is not merely intellectual knowledge, and this knowledge is actually seeping into you when you become detached. See, you can't know this and still be attached. This knowledge itself is a detachment, right? It's a separation. Not detachment from others, detachment from your own ego. Detachment from your own ego, from your own body. So the manifestation of this knowledge is detachment, humility, unselfishness. What is unselfishness? When you're able to, the storm of your own body, and when I say body, I mean body, mind, intellect. The storm of your own body, mind, intellect is controlled. You're able to step back and think holistically. So the way it manifests, the way you know that this knowledge is actually percolating, is through these qualities. The core is detachment. The core is an objectivity. Sakshi Bhav. This is Sakshi Bhav. What we've discussed for the last 1 hour is Sakshi. So that's how you'll know that there's actually some change happening. Otherwise, it's understood at the intellectual level. That's about it.
Good, sir.
Yeah.
So it's detachment from your own ego and your own body, not from the world and the worldly things.
That is detachment. If you think detachment means detachment from others, if you ask a layperson what is detachment, they'll say, "Oh, detachment means moving away from others. Detachment means going into your own path, away from." They'll have all these ideas, but the crux of their understanding will be detachment from others. But what is detachment? What is renunciation? It's detachment from your own ego, detachment from your own mind's attachments, clingings. It's not a separation from others. It's not allowing your mind to overtake, not allowing your mind to cling. That is detachment. because the mind by nature will cling. So you can't stop the mind from getting attached. You have to understand this. You can't stop the mind from getting attached. You have to detach from the mind. It's worth thinking about. The mind will always be the mind. Dil to akhir dil hai na. Right?
It gets attached to
The
everything.
mind will always be the mind. Are you attaching yourself with the mind is the question. The hallmark of detachment is not that's this is insight. You detaching from your mind. So the mind will continue to do what it does. But the mind is like a child. If you stop giving it attention, it'll stop throwing its tantrums, right? Its expression immediately will become a fraction if you detach from it. So the meaning of detachment is not detachment from others. The meaning of detachment is detachment from your own body, your own mind, your own intellect. It's the meaning of detachment.
Can you expand more on that? Detachment from your body to detachment from your mind. Can you expand a little more on that?
When we talk about the subject of detachment, it's often thought that detachment means separating yourself from others, from some external entities, from people or from situations or from responsibilities or from preoccupations, from certain actions. So detachment always has an outward connotation, but actually detachment is an inner phenomenon. So that's what we're trying to explain, that true detachment is actually the initial form of Kshetra and Kshetrajna, realizing that your body is the Kshetra, your mind is the Kshetra, your intellect is the Kshetra, and you are distinct and separate from it. The moment, what is detachment from the body? It's understanding the body is going through heat and cold. The body is going through pleasure or pain, not you. Almost immediately, it will make you immune.
But can it really make you immune to dukh? So how can it make you immune?
Experience it.
I'm just wondering, how can it immune? Matlab,
You have to experience it. See, Ramana Maharishi, they said he had a tumor on his back. I don't know if it's widely accepted. This is true. He had a tumor on his back. He asked the doctor to come and operate it. He was reading the newspaper. That's an extreme example. I'm giving you an extreme example just to highlight the point that as you grow, you're able to let the mind, let the body experience whatever they're experiencing without yourself being affected by it. That is detachment. Not only bad, even good. Not only negative experiences, even in joy, in elation. What is detachment? Not allowing your mind is going to feel ecstasy. Your intellect will also feel arrogance. Not getting carried away in that ecstasy, not getting carried away in that arrogance. But
so basically, use your
For that,
basically use your buddhi and think that all this will pass away.
absolutely. So in the way to explain it is, yes, your buddhi is applying its knowledge to understand and implement a certain knowledge. But when you look at it from the lens of Kshetra and Kshetrajna, it's your Kshetrajna separating itself from the Kshetra. It's you identifying
That
with the Kshetrajna.
that is actually becoming a little high-fi.
See, who are you? Who are you? That's what we're trying to invoke out here. You are the Kshetrajna. You are feeling emotions through the mind. You are analyzing knowledge through the intellect. Okay. You are feeling emotions through the mind. You're analyzing knowledge through the intellect. You're perceiving objects and sense objects through the body and its senses. But you are separate from the body. You're separate from the mind. You're separate from the intellect. So that an understanding of that separation is detachment. When you understand that, you won't have to go anywhere. You won't have to move away from anybody. You won't have to stop yourself from any situation. You won't have to get away from anything. That's detachment.
You have control over your own.
So the extent to which you are detached, to that extent, you will be unaffected by the situation, by your environment. Your body will feel heat and cold. Your mind will feel pleasure and pain, joy and sorrow. Your intellect will experience awakening or confusion, honor or dishonor. But you will be unaffected. That is detachment.
May I ask a question, please? How do you come to this stage of feeling this? You know, the body, of course, the body is fine, but when you feel, say, you're doing something, what is right, what is wrong, but how to reach that you're not attached to that thing, what you're doing is right or wrong. How do you come to it? What do you do to be? What do you do at each situation to really not feel it, not be attached to it? I've understood that.
It's only through spiritual evolution that you come to that level. Now, what we're talking about, a detachment from the mind, is perhaps the zenith of
Yeah. Okay.
evolution, right? So we are only talking about it for the purpose of understanding it. If you ask me to implement and reach it, it's not like an everyday exercise, right? But yes, it is reachable, it is achievable. In fact, it is what you are capable of, and you want to achieve on your spiritual journey. But it's only through growth that you reach that state, right? um, it's like, sorry to use this example, but to a beggar to a beggar, uh, um, someone with a few hundred crores of wealth and a Mukesh Ambani are the same. They can't quite understand the nuances and the distinction between someone who has 300 crores or 30,000 crores. So, from our vantage point, understanding the distinction and the nuances between someone who's entirely detached versus someone who's relatively detached, it's difficult to make those distinctions. You have to reach there to know the difference. That said, broadly speaking, the path of spiritual evolution is a gradual elimination of desires.
I think the question was what even I'm having the same question only what Rita ji is saying कि that ये जो आप जो बोल रहे हो डिटैचमेंट माइंड तो जेनिथ है बट ये हम स्टार्ट जो डिटैचमेंट करना चाहें समझ रहे हैं ये बात को कि हाँ ये डिटैचमेंट है हम बॉडी नहीं है हम माइंड नहीं है हम आत्मन है हम भगवान के ही अंश हैं मतलब हम भगवान ही हैं रादर बट इस चीज पे प्रोग्रेस करने के लिए हम लोग को मतलब वो अंजलि की जी का भाषा में व्हाट आर द टूल्स
आज के the tools are karma bhakti jnana. The tools are karma bhakti jnana. Today you have learned one is jnanam. You have learned the tool of jnanam. Till today you don't have this distinction of kshetra and kshetrajna. See, the funda is simple. Karma yoga will reduce the bulk of your desires. Bhakti will improve the quality of your desires. Jnanam will shift the direction of your desires. There's no fast tracking this. Just get on to karma. Just get on to karma. Pick up a higher goal in your life and dedicate yourself to it. Develop the attitude of gratitude. Work in the spirit of service and sacrifice in whatever you do. Go revisit chapter 3, 4, 5, 6, study it again and again. That's it. To answer your question of how to get there, right? Simply put. Otherwise, it will just become intellectual jargon.
So to be very honest, I'm still this third, fourth, fifth chapter. I'm still able to relate to those chapters only. ये जो भक्ति योग आया है, I'm not been able to grasp it well. That's why I'm still there. I keep on listening to these third, fourth, fifth chapters. I would urge all to go back and revisit these videos which are on that on Dropbox.
So coming back to your your point about how to get there. As you grow in objectivity, as you grow, and the objectivity comes through an elimination of desire. So as you grow through karma, the bhakti and the jnana become deeper. That's about it. What is bhakti? Bhakti is an awareness of the splash of divinity. That awareness becomes more permanent, more concrete. What is jnanam? Jnanam is the distinction between the real and the unreal, the permanent and the impermanent. That awareness of the permanent and the impermanent becomes more consistent. So when your mind is in that state of jnanam and bhakti, automatically there will be a detachment. Automatically, that will be the state of your mind. That will be the kind of awareness you have. Right now, what is the state of your mind?
Will be the effect.
Sorry?
Detachment will be the effect.
Detachment is
When I'm doing my properly and I'm aware of that divinity, aware of divinity everywhere, वो अपने आप कब detachment हो जाएगा पता ही नहीं चलेगा. So we should not look through detachment. I feel we should continue to do our karma and be aware of the divinity, वो अपने आप ही शायद आ जाएगा.
Indeed. Indeed.
Thank you.
So, if certain concepts appeal to you right now, engage with them. If they seem too far-fetched, shelve them. Shelve them to the back. You take whatever is helpful. Take whatever is useful. But remember this, karma reduces the bulk of your desires. There's no bypassing karma. There's no bypassing karma. Even in chapter 17, he says, don't give up yajna dana tapaha. No matter how big you become, no matter how much you evolve, don't give up that spirit of service and sacrifice, that charitable disposition, that tapaha, that austerity, that spiritual effort. So karma is the means. You'll taste it. You know, it's not a 0 or 100. Huh? You'll rise from 0 to 10 to 20 to 30 to 40, and at each level, maybe every 6 months, every 9 months, every 2 years, or whatever, you'll have a different way of looking at the world. This process shifts your worldview. It shifts the way in which you relate to things, relate to the world. So this sense of detachment will be a gradual awakening. It will be a gradual realization. But as Yasho said, you won't even realize when you've become detached. One fine day, suddenly, it'll be that spontaneous reaction to a certain occasion. You'll surprise yourself. You'll surprise yourself. Oh, I didn't know I was.
जो फर्स्ट चीज है ना रीता जी, जो कर्म वाला पार्ट है ना, आई थिंक वही अपने ट्रूली नहीं कर रहे हैं और अपने बहुत आगे पहुंचना चाह रहे हैं. We have to work there first. We are still stuck up there. We have those ego that I am doing, and we have those craving for the free time.
Are on that level.
That is a problem. I'm facing this problem every day.
All of us are.
It's not a problem. Okay. Any
Thank
further
you.
questions?
Our experience.
If not, we'll conclude today and we'll see you again day after tomorrow on Thursday. Have a good day. Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Thank you.